Kashmir with band online family in तरफ सलाम दुआ आज बटवार बेक फिर से इस रूबरू सोन अजुक प्रोग्राम है तो आज तिश सन पेंड अकिस अहम इशूस पे नाजरीन यदि तुह पाई छो कि यूजुअली यम सन इशूज या पैनल डिस्कशंस सह कह नत कह सैनिस समाज सान जिंदगी सहित रिलेटेड अहम इशूज अक्सर सन इशूज यम पर्टिनेंट डायरेक्टली मगर मज तुथ कह इशू तक फॉर एग्जाम्पल यम सात स्टूडेंटन कत कर या तम मजीद ते बेस बासान तमिश रेलिवेंस टोटल कशरसी कह नबर तमिच रेलिवेंस अमे हिसाब सोन अजुक प्रोग्राम तमे मूजूब सन जबान आज सह कोशर योतन महदूद की तथ मज उर्दू अंग्रेज तो सन यम कोशर नाजरीन यम प्रेफर करान कोशर पे योतन बोजन तिमन आज एडवांसस मज माजरत खा क्योंकि अजुक प्रोग्राम अमिच रेलिवेंस या एप्लिकेबिलिटी कुन जाय इंसान तमिस हर अकिस रूपस मज तमी मूजूब थो अजिच लैंग्वेज थोड़ा सा डिफरेंट नाजरीन यन जन तुम पाई छो यन वुचान कि अगर टेक्नोलॉजी हज कत करो टेक्नोलॉजी सन जिंदगी आसान तो सहल बन सान काम आसान गम सन जिंदगी सहल तो आसान गम मुफीद टेक्नोलॉजी खुद मगर क्या यह यूत योतन कि अम फ़ायदे मिलोमुत फोन तुलान कह फोन करान मोबाइल कैरी करान इंटरनेट से दुनिया कुन हेकान वुचित क्या यूत क्या अमिक नुकसान क्या अम या सन प्रिवेसी या सन सिक्योरिटी या सोन पान सह ग कॉम्प्रोमाइज कुन हदस ताम कुन सेंसस मज आज लगभग तिथसी अकिस इशूस पे कत कर तो अजुक इशू क्या तथ पे ज्यादा तफसील दिन खतर तो कम पैनलिस्ट जुड़ेमत पन पन इलम पन एक्सपीरियंस चीज़ रिलेटेड शेयर कर सह वन ताहिर सर ओवर टू यू ताहिर सर।
शुक्रिया तौसीफ। बिल्कुल जैसे तौसीफ ने फरमाया कि आज का जो प्रोग्राम है वो मुख्तलिफ है इस लिहाज से कि हम अक्सर जो हमारे प्रोग्राम होते हैं वो कश्मीरी में अंजाम देते हैं, लेकिन आज हम जो ज़ुबान यूज़ करेंगे वो है उर्दू और इंग्लिश, क्योंकि जो हमारा आज का प्रोग्राम है इट इज़ रेलिवेंट टू द ग्लोबल ऑडियंस। सो आज का प्रोग्राम जो है हम बात करेंगे सर्विलेंस एंड प्राइवेसी पर, और ये क्यों अहम है? ये अहम इसलिए है कि अगर आपने देखा होगा पिछले 10 साल से 15 साल से जो ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा पॉपुलेशन है जो हमारी दुनिया में या कश्मीर में या बरसगीर में, इट हैज़ बिकम डिपेंडेंट ऑन टेक्नोलॉजी, ऑन डिजिटल सर्विसेज और ऑनलाइन सर्विसेज, चाहे वो आपका ईमेल हो, चाहे आपका सोशल मीडिया पे जितने भी आपके ऐप्स हैं। लेकिन आप जब ये चीज़ें यूज़ करते हैं तो आप सिर्फ सर्विसेज लेते नहीं हैं, आप यहाँ से भी कुछ चीज़ें देते हो जिसकी बुनियाद पे ये कंपनीज अपना प्रॉफिट कमाती है। लेकिन क्या जब वो ये प्रॉफिट कमाती है वो हमें किसी इनसिक्योरिटी में खड़ा कर देती है, या क्या वो हमारा जो प्राइवेसी है उसको ब्रीच करते हैं? तो ये सब चीज़ें जो है हमारे लिए अहम है जानने के लिए, ठीक है। तो अभी जो कोविड-19 आया इसमें ये हुआ कि हमको पता चला कि हाउ डिपेंडेंट आर वी ऑन द टेक्नोलॉजीज, बिकॉज इससे पहले तो हम स्मार्टफोन नहीं देते थे अपने बच्चों को, या बहुत कम ऐसे पेरेंट्स थे जो स्मार्टफोन देते थे। लेकिन अब चूंकि क्लासेस ऑनलाइन होती है सो वी हैव टू सब्सक्राइब टू जूम है या बाकी जो है गूगल मीट वगैरह। तो इसका मतलब है कि वी हैव टू बी डिपेंडेंट ऑन दिस टेक्नोलॉजीज, एंड what are the implications or what are the pros and cons of these technologies, वो हम जानने की कोशिश करेंगे आज। तो हमने आज जो एक्सपर्ट्स बुलाए हैं उसमें हमारे साथ मौजूद है यासिर अल्ताफ जरगर साहब जो वेब सिक्योरिटी एनालिस्ट है और वो को फाउंडर है शफारा क्रिएटिव्स के। तो इसके मज़ीद हमारे साथ डॉक्टर उज़ैर बशीर साहब है, ये एक लेक्चरर है गवर्नमेंट कॉलेज में कश्मीर में, और इनकी जो स्पेशलाइजेशन है वो नेटवर्क सिक्योरिटी से रिलेटेड है। और हमारे साथ जुड़ी है डॉक्टर गोल्डी असूरी जो डिपार्टमेंट ऑफ सोशियोलॉजी यूनिवर्सिटी ऑफ वॉरिक से ताल्लुक़ रखती है, और इन्होंने जो आर्टिकल्स लिखे या जो किताबें लिखी है वो पोस्ट कॉलोनियल अप्रोच के हिसाब से लिखी है, और कश्मीर भी उनमें से एक टॉपिक एक अहम टॉपिक है, ठीक है। तो इन तमाम आपने गेस्ट का हम तहे दिल से शुक्रिया अदा करते हैं कि आप हमारी स्पेंड ऑनलाइन पे आए आज, और हमारे साथ अपने जो आप अपनी एक्सपर्ट ओपिनियंस शेयर करेंगे, और हम उम्मीद है कि हमारे जो ऑडियंसेस है वो इससे इस्तिफादा हासिल करेगी और एक बेटर और इन्फॉर्म डिसीजन लेगी जब वो ऐसे सर्विसेज यूज़ करेंगे। तो बिना वक्त गवाए हुए मैं अब तौसीफ साहब की तरफ गुजारिश करूंगा कि वो सवाल और जवाब का सिलसिला जारी करें।
शुक्रिया ताहिर साहब। बिल्कुल, जो हमारे आज के मेहमान हैं, हम तहे दिल से आपका शुक्रिया करते हैं कि आपने अपना कीमती वक्त निकाला। ऑल्दो आज हम डेटा, नेटवर्क, इंटरनेट इससे रिलेटेड बात करने वाले हैं, और आज पहली दफ़ा हमें सबसे ज़्यादा प्रॉब्लम भी हुई कि हमें कनेक्ट करने में बहुत टाइम लगा, और तभी हम 15 मिनट डिले हो गए, 15-20 मिनट। तो उसके लिए भी हम अपने नाजरीन के माजरत ख्वाह हैं। तो विदाउट वेस्टिंग एनी फर्दर टाइम, मैं पहले उज़ैर यासिर आपसे पूछना चाहूँगा। यासिर, अगर एक आम इंसान की जुबान में बात की जाए, हम ये डेटा प्रोटेक्शन, डेटा सिक्योरिटी या सर्वेलेंस, इसको कैसे समझ सकते हैं? ये सब क्या है, और ये मेरे बारे में या एक आम इंसान के बारे में कैसे अहम है? हाउ इज इट रिलेटेड टू अस?
अस्सलाम वालेकुम।
वालेकुम अस्सलाम।
एक्चुअल में मैं स्टार्ट करना चाहता हूँ लाइक फॉर ए लेमैन, लाइक जो भी आप हम सेंड करते हैं, चाहे सर्च करते हैं, उसको हम नॉर्मली एक डेटा, मतलब जैसे सबको ही पता होगा इस टाइम, क्योंकि सभी इस टाइम इंटरनेट पे डिपेंडेंट है, तो हर कोई रिक्वेस्ट जो भी जाती है चाहे वहां से आती है, सो वी कैन अंडरस्टैंड दैट्स अ डेटा। सो द सेकंड थिंग इज कि उसकी सिक्योरिटी क्यों इंपॉर्टेंट होने लगी है पिछले 5-6 साल से। तो 5 से 6 साल पहले तो इतनी सिक्योरिटी इस पे ध्यान नहीं दिया जाता था। is Urdu for everybody, or do we have any language specialization?
नहीं, just be as easy as you are। उर्दू में आराम से आप बात करें, कोई इशू।
ठीक है। तो दूसरी बात है ये डेटा सिक्योरिटी की। डेटा सिक्योरिटी जो है बेसिकली जब 5-6 साल पहले ऐसा कोई कंसेप्ट ही नहीं था, तो राइट नाउ लाइक साइबर क्राइम्स जब होने लगे, तो उससे हमें ये पता चल रहा है कि हमें क्यों ऑनलाइन ये ना विजिलेंट रहना चाहिए, हमें अपने डेटा की प्रोटेक्शन क्यों करनी चाहिए। लाइक रिसेंटली रैंसमवेयर अटैक हुआ था सभी कंप्यूटर्स पे, सो हमारे कंप्यूटर्स लॉक किए गए थे। लाइक अगर मेरे कंप्यूटर पे अटैक हुआ था तो मेरा कंप्यूटर लॉक हुआ था। फॉर एग्जांपल मैं अपने बारे में बोलता हूँ, तो फिर मुझे अपना कंप्यूटर ये ना ऑन करने के लिए ये उनको पैसे देने थे। सो बिकॉज ऑफ दीज अटैक्स एक लेमैन को ये समझ में आने लगा कि मैं क्या why do we need to have these data security? So third thing is because of these cyber attacks जो globally होने लगे, like रिसेंटली राइशा, लाइक अगर हम कोविड में ही देखेंगे तो राइशा ने एलिज किया है ना, ऑक्सफोर्ड यूनिवर्सिटी ने एलिज किया राइशा को कि उन्होंने हमारा डेटा, ये कोविड की जो थ्योरी थी तो वो उन्होंने हमसे हैक कर ली गई। तो बिकॉज ऑफ दीज थिंग्स वी गेट टू नो, एक लेमैन को ये नॉलेज रहता है कि हमें क्यों जरूरत है कि साइबर सिक्योरिटी की। तो अब हम थोड़ा सा ये ना प्राइवेसी पे बात करते हैं। जैसे कि लाइक हम सब के पास एक फेसबुक अकाउंट होता है, तो व्हाट इन कश्मीर और इन इंडिया, लाइक इन साउथ एशिया व्हाट हैपेंस कि हम अपने फोटोज लाइक पब्लिकली डालते हैं। वो जो फोटोज सभी होते हैं तो वो सभी पब्लिक डोमेन में चले जाते हैं, लाइक गूगल पे फिर वो अवेलेबल होते हैं। अगर हम अपने लाइक प्रोफाइल सर्च करेंगे गूगल पे तो हमारी लगभग सभी इंफॉर्मेशन गूगल पे अवेलेबल होती है। सो बिकॉज ऑफ दीज थिंग्स जब हम ये देखते हैं कि ये जो हमारी इंफॉर्मेशन है वो हमारे खिलाफ यूटिलाइज होती है, तो फिर हमें तब अंदाजा होता है कि हमें ये साइबर सिक्योरिटी या डेटा सिक्योरिटी की जरूरत क्यों है। सो बिकॉज ऑफ दीज थिंग्स, these emerging attacks or these latest like phishing attacks, wishing attacks या फोन कॉल्स अटैक्स आने लगते हैं, तो तभी हमें अंदाजा होता है कि रिसेंटली कश्मीर में क्या हुआ था कि लाइक एक स्कैम रन हुआ था कि लोगों को कॉल आती थी हमें ओटीपी दीजिए अपने ये एटीएम्स के, या फेक ट्रांजैक्शंस हो रहे थे। तो तभी कश्मीर के जब कुछ लोगों को लाइक यहाँ की जो साइबर पुलिस है उन्होंने कुछ इनिशिएशंस की, कुछ स्टेप्स की, एनहांसमेंट की यहाँ की साइबर पॉलिसी में, तो जब उनको भी पता चला कि यहाँ पे डे बाय डे साइबर अटैक्स होने, पीपल लोगों पे लाइक उनके पैसे लिए चोरी होने लगे, तो तभी सबको अंदाजा होने लगा कि ऑनलाइन में हमें कितना विजिलेंट रहना चाहिए।
शुक्रिया यासिर, बिल्कुल जैसे आपने फरमाया कि वी हैव टू बी विजिलेंट अबाउट यू नो व्हेन वी डू सम ऑनलाइन एक्टिविटीज। तो यहाँ पे मैं उज़ैर साहब की तरफ आऊँगा। एंड उज़ैर, मैं द क्वेश्चन आई वांट टू आस्क यू इज कि जब हम कोई सर्विस सब्सक्राइब करते हैं, चाहे वो कोई ऐप हम डाउनलोड करें, ठीक है, या रिसेंटली बहुत सारे पेरेंट्स को जूम डाउनलोड करना पड़ा या बाकी ऐप्स डाउनलोड करने पड़े, तो वी डू नॉट हैव टाइम टू रीड द फाइन प्रिंट जो टर्म्स एंड कंडीशंस होती है, राइट? तो अक्सर हमें लगता है कि वी आर नॉट गिविंग टू मच और वी नो व्हाट वी आर गिविंग अवे, लेकिन क्या 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 चीजें होती है बेसिकली उस फाइन प्रिंट में जो वो अक्सर हमसे लेते हैं, या व्हाट इज द काइंड ऑफ डेटा दे टेक फ्रॉम अस? कि बहुत सारे लोगों को लगता है क्या ज्यादा से ज्यादा क्या हो जाएगा, बट व्हाट इज इन द फाइन प्रिंट?
Yes, thank you. Now, basically, I will start with a statement that I always tell my students, is that that whenever you connect to an internet, remember one thing, that you are connected to the President of United States, and the President of United States is connected to you, because this is internet. So you will always be connected with every other person that is connected to the internet. You just keep that in mind. For a layman, this thing is very important to understand. Now, as my colleague was talking about how it has become more prominent in these years, it's basically because the frauds have increased in those areas which are not technically very sound. They have just recently been introduced to the technology, and usually these attackers, misfeasors, they will attack those people who are laymen. They don't have knowledge of this, how this works on. Now, as you asked me the question, as how different apps take legal permissions from us, and we don't know, we don't read about those permissions, etc. But I don't think we can actually go past this. Even if there is an expert of this technological field, I don't think there's a way to go past around this, because they will ask you things sometimes which are prominently, you are aware of that they will be taking this information from me, but instead some other agency will be using that data, and you will end up giving information about yourself which you don't want to give. Like, for example, Google will take your date of birth, and probably if I was a girl, I would not let them know my age, but because I have given my date of birth, I was not aware that they are going to calculate age from this, but they have, because I have given the date of birth. So there are, in these legal terms, basically, first of all, there are like, there are hundreds of points. We don't have time to go through them. But even if we go through every single point, we won't get past this, because they will be taking information which you know that they need our information for this and this purpose, but tomorrow that will be used for some other purpose. For example, in the initial days when Google introduced the GPS and the location tracking was enabled, everybody actually, because they didn't have a knowledge of what this was going to look like, they were given I would say the fruits that they will receive from this. For example, if they go to such location, their friends will come to know that they're already present there, and they will get the beneficial points out of this. And people got moved away, and they specifically kept their information about their location on, so that everybody knows about their location. But then after 5 or 10 years of research, we came to know that even if you turn off that this location was not used in a good way, and now when we have chosen to turn off your location, you will see that Google will share the information about your location even if you close your location, the settings on your mobile phones. So probably I don't think that there is a way to go past this. Yes, there are few steps that can be taken, like we could actually read out certain important points, and we should be aware that this information will be going to use in future about some other thing also as well. So if we are taking the good side of this technology, we have to be aware that there's a bad side to it, and it is probably not that company who you are sharing data with. It must be some other attacker who attacks that organization servers, and they will end up taking your data. So it's one way or the other, you have to actually live with it. I think now, and at this point of time, there is no actually getting away with this, I would say.
Thank you, Uzair. Sounds a little scary.
I'm sorry, but I'm speaking the truth. But
Yeah,
I
absolutely. बिल्कुल यही आज की दुनिया है और इसी dimension पे मैं गोल्डी I'm coming to you. तो जब हम बात करते हैं like there are certain big terms which are used. For example, surveillance capitalism. तो अगर हम सर्वेलेंस कैपिटलिज्म की बात कर रहे हैं, व्हाट डू वी अंडरस्टैंड बाय दैट? एंड देन ये एक कंपनी या लाइक ट्रांसनेशनल कॉर्पोरेशंस या जो आईटी जायंट्स हैं, व्हाट डू दे अचीव आउट ऑफ आवर इंफॉर्मेशन? फॉर एग्जांपल जो उन्होंने हमारा डेटा लिया है, वो उससे उनको क्या फायदा मिलता है, वो कैसे इसको मैनिपुलेट कर सकते हैं? एंड ये सारे सिस्टम को फिर हम पॉलिटिकली ओवेलियन क्यों कहते हैं? व्हाई इज दिस एंटायर सिस्टम बीइंग कॉल्ड एन ओवेलियन सिस्टम?
Thank you to Tahir Saab, Tasif Saab, and the other panelists, Uzair and Yasir. I'm just happy to be here and chatting with you all. So basically, yeah, I mean, Tasif, you're right. You're talking about these big terms like surveillance capitalism, but it's actually quite it's very descriptive, because this is exactly what this is. Uzair Saab has already mentioned how all of this data, and Yasir Saab has also mentioned how this data is taken. So just even things like, just whether it's your date of birth, whether it's your likes and dislikes, जो आप like और dislike डालते हैं Facebook पे या Twitter पे या कहीं और. And it's, on these supposedly free usage of search engines or social media platforms or apps. But then this data is harvested and it is sold to companies that need it for whatever reason. So we have several examples of that. So surveillance capitalism is basically, I think this Harvard sociologist, Shoshana Zuboff, calls it a global architecture of computer mediation. So we don't live outside a mediated world, right? We cannot live outside that world. I think this was Uzair Saab's point. So surveillance capitalism makes money for a few out of big data harvested by digital services. It's an ongoing issue everywhere. I think what I also want to emphasize that it's not just a commercial thing. It's not just about companies taking that data and then the next thing, aapne like dala kuch, somebody's Facebook post or something, or you searched for some shoes to buy and the next minute you're bombarded by shoe ads and those sorts of things. So it's not just about that. It is about that, but the other thing that also happens is that that data can be then sold to to rig or maneuver elections, for example. So this we saw this in the Cambridge Analytica scandal with the US elections, for example. It's also sold often or can be sold by tech companies to supposedly combat crime or engage in counter-terrorism to governments. And that is also part of this surveillance capitalism, because that data then is used against populations who might be, under occupation, for example. So those kinds of, there are so many layers to this idea of surveillance capitalism. That's one of the things I just wanted to kind of highlight. And I think that's, if I'm not mistaken, Shoshana Zuboff talks about digital capitalism just in terms of the power that these companies have in terms of harvesting our data, but also then accruing a power to these few companies, like say whether it's Amazon or Facebook and so on. But I think we can expand it to think about all these other kinds of capitalism, which also show political power over people.
Thank you, Goldie, for unpacking this concept for our audiences. And now I will turn to Yasir. Yasir, हमारी ऑडियंस को बताइए कि जब हम बात करते हैं साइबर अटैक्स की, तो वो साइबर अटैक होता क्या है और किस तरीके से ये यूज किया जाता है to kind of get into our systems or computers and steal our data and all that for our lay audience?
Actually, what happens, there are many types of cyber attacks. basically like if you want to target any individual, any company or any government. So it's based on these three types. So basically what happens, if an individual is targeting another individual, like hacking his Facebook account or hacking his personal website, this is how a person like launches phishing attacks to grab his personal details or anything else. The second thing, if a individual is targeting any company, any specific company, he finds vulnerabilities like flaws in their websites. So that these are the things. That's how a person wants attack to these companies. Or if a person like there has been a modern trend to like a sort of to show resistance to hack government portals and deliver some sort of a political message to these governments, because they do not listen like this. It often happens in Kashmir, like money hackers from Kashmir hack websites of like Indian websites or any Pakistani websites, so to deliver some sort of message to these people. So because they are not listening to the people, so these are the things the people have given this as active resistance. So these happens. Another thing is I would like to add like how basically these things happens. If an attacker is launching attack on any other person, so what steps he uses to attack another person? Like first is like money have here, like in our emails, if you see, we actually get emails like rough emails on our spam boxes or inboxes, like you have some sort of lottery, or we receive these SMSs regularly. This is how these are the steps which an attacker launches on another individual, so to grab his personal details, personal login addresses. So basically what actually is this phishing attack? Phishing attack is like like you have a website, you get another website of a similar group. बेसिक एक ही डिजाइन में लाइक फेसबुक का लॉगिन पेज जैसे होता है, वैसे ही अनदर एक फिशिंग पेज होता है जो आपको रीडायरेक्ट करता है. यू आर नॉट एबल टू गेस व्हाट इज दिस अ राइट पेज और इज अ रॉन्ग पेज. सो एज ए लेमैन हम सभी एंटर करते हैं पासवर्ड, सो वो पासवर्ड किसी हैकर के पास चला जाता है. देन आफ्टर दैट is able to brute into your Facebook page or in your email account. So from that email account, he launched to another, to your friends, to your family, to your parents, or checks your inbox. Maybe some time you have used there are like cookie based attacks from where a hacker gets cookies of your like what you have surfed, get tokens of your when a person accesses website, there generates some sort of tokens or some sort of sessions. So if an attacker has launched a phishing attack on any person, so through these attacks he gets user data which he later on harvest or use that for getting your money, getting your personal credentials or anything else. The second setup is like calling. You may have faced many times you get a call from any person who asks you OTP or who asks you about yourself. आप कहाँ से बोल रहे हो, क्या बोल रहे हो, आपका nickname क्या है. These are the things a person uses to protect his social media accounts or banking accounts or net banking accounts. So after that he uses like other features like those features are actually meant for us to retrieve our forgotten passwords or forgotten things. So these things, that time if you have sometimes forgotten your password, you Facebook or any other website asks you these details. What's your nickname? How do you know that you are the right person? You are how we will know that you are the right person, that we will provide the actual password. There are some other attacks like we find flaws on these, like hackers find flaws on websites. Like recently you may have heard about Pegasus. In India recently attack was launched on government politicians from, that was Israeli malware which uses vulnerability of WhatsApp, and later on many people got hacked. That's how the severity of these attacks happen.
थैंक यू यासिर. बिल्कुल, हमारा जो डेटा है, हमारी पर्सनल इंफॉर्मेशन जो है वो डिफरेंट तरीकों से एक्सप्लॉइट हो सकती है, कभी लाइक कॉल के थ्रू, कभी इंटरनेट के थ्रू. सो ये है कि हम वल्नरेबल होते हैं हर एक वक्त पे अगर हम देखें. तो इसी ज़िम्न में मैं उज़ैर आपसे पूछना चाहूँगा यहाँ पर, अगर हम अपनी बात करें, इस वक्त हार्डली कोई ऐसा शख्स होगा, कोई ऐसा अडल्ट होगा जिसके पास फ़ोन नहीं होगा या स्मार्टफोन नहीं होगा, या कंप्यूटर नहीं होगा, या लैपटॉप को एक्सेस नहीं होगी, या ईमेल उनके पास नहीं होगा। सो एक ऐसे हम वर्ल्ड सिनेरियो में है जहां हर कोई किसी ना किसी तरीके से टेक्नोलॉजी, इंटरनेट, इन सब चीज़ों से कनेक्टेड है। तो ऐसे में हमारी प्रिवेसी या हमारा प्राइवेट सच में कितना प्राइवेट और पर्सनल है? हाउ प्राइवेट आर वी? और जब फिर हम बात करते हैं कि जी ये फोन या ये टेक्नोलॉजी या इस कंपनी का, फॉर एग्जांपल एप्पल या और कुछ, ये ज्यादा सिक्योर होते हैं, ज्यादा क्रिप्टेड होते हैं, तो आप ज्यादा सिक्योर हैं, चाइनीज फोन कम सिक्योर होते हैं। इन जनरल अगर देखें हमारी पर्सनल, लाइक हमारा पर्सनल या हमारी प्रिवेसी, वो कितना इतना प्राइवेट या पर्सनल है?
Yeah, thank you. So basically, I would suggest that when we talk about privacy on this internet, we forget about privacy first of all. So this word does not basically exist. But when we talk about our personal preferences, like we talk about Apple phones being more secure and Chinese phones being less secure, I think that is more of an narrative that has come that they push forward. Basically, uh, if you talk about iPhones, they are made in China. So the Foxconn is one of the chip makers. They provide this and these chips. Now, few years back, I read an article where what they said there were few servers that were delivered to India, and they had those chips installed on their motherboards, which is very basic to the hardware level, and nobody actually thought of that. And now, even if this did not happen, but this thing has now been installed in the minds of some organizations who would actually take these steps, and they will say, no, we won't want to buy from China, but we will buy the same server from United States, who will charge them more, but they are actually purchasing their chips at hardware level from China. So I don't think basically these are more like political issues rather than anything related to technology. Talking about privacy, but what we could do is basically we can create an illusion around ourselves that okay, we are secure, and we can take some you can say physical steps. Like for example, I will give you an example of some privacy issue that happens with your selfie cameras or the cameras that are present on your laptops. So they would be 10 years back or 20 years back, they would be using the web cameras in your laptops they would turn that on themselves, and they would see whatever is in the room. They will actually somebody has a laptop in their bedroom, somebody has a laptop in their office, and they would actually move away the privacy of a person. So what has come to the light is that when people come to know about this, they will either take a tape. I know my friend, he is basically a technological expert, and he uses a tape to place it on the web camera of this laptops. And similarly, Lenovo and other these laptop makers, they would place a physical button on the web camera, so that physical steps will be taken, so that person is aware and he is assured that physical things cannot be changed. Like if he places a tape on the web camera, or he places a finger on this web camera, he could be assured that nobody is looking into him. Similarly, there are steps where you actually are content in your heart that these steps have actually they have actually looked into my privacy. But there are steps where you actually sort of give a consent in your heart, but you know that it's not right, that I am doing this. I am, for example, I give an example that I'm turning off my location. Okay, I'm secure, but deep in my heart, I know that I'm not secure. Google is following me. In the past elections, you would see U.S. councilmen actually bringing the CEOs of Facebook and Google in front of law and asking them that why you were tracking people if they had kept their locations off, and they would reply by saying that this is for their own purposes and etc. So they have their lawyers, they are paid huge sums to defend them. So I would say there are some steps where persons deep in their heart would know, at least those who are educated enough, they know that even if they take these steps, they are not actually secure. But there are some steps, like physical steps. I told you that closing the web camera and like physical aspects of this security, that they are aware that this cannot actually be turned off unless a person itself does it. So I think there are certain steps where this is just an illusion, and there are certain steps where you just take it known that it has actually helped.
थैंक यू उजैर बिल्कुल जैसे आप फरमा रहे हैं कि it's very tricky situation over there. It's very complicated as well. So now my next question.
I would add a little bit to it, like
sure.
Like this meeting is going on, and you are the ones who are actually turning on and off my microphone. So it is actually you who are rigging my microphone. Thank you. This is just.
Yeah. Sure. गोल्डी जैसे कि हम देखते हैं कि पिछले 15 साल में टेक्नोलॉजी जो है वो बहुत इम्प्रूव हुई है, इनोवेशंस हुए हैं, एंड देयर हैज बीन दिस सॉर्ट ऑफ digital revolution, and what it happened was it in a way democratized the communication. और उससे क्या हुआ, जो social movements है या political movements है, they got empowered, right? So there was this moment when they utilized the social media and other technologies, like in Arab Spring जैसे use हुआ है. So what has been the response of the states, particularly the autocratic, semi-autocratic or illiberal जो countries है या states है, उनका क्या response रहा है to kind of counter this or kind of suppress this?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I mean, it was like a flowering, especially, you know, when you think about in Egypt in 2011, for example. I mean, it's not that you know, many people have made the point that it's not as if there was already activism. There was, but the activists were able to use this in a very effective way to bring, you know, mass sort of a mass kind of uprising, and you know, they call them the Arab revolutions. But at the same time, at that very moment, the state also cracked down, right? At that very time, it's the state was able to crack down precisely because of these kinds of platforms, either through, you know, shutdowns or surveillance, and so on. And I think, I mean, I don't need to sort of talk to the Kashmiri audience. They would already know. They've been in the longest running sort of in a democracy internet siege, for example. But even before that, I mean, even with the start of, for example, Facebook in India and in Kashmir, for example, you had young people using Facebook and other YouTube and other platforms to share things about human rights violations. I think there's 2 points I want to make about that. Not only that the state at that point was, or any given regime, any illiberal regime, for example, immediately cracks down by either shutting down or removing kind of posts. But the larger point that I want to make is that it's not just about the state engaging in this, but often it is very much the big companies themselves, the platforms themselves, who either are, you know, listening to the state, for example, or because they want good relations with the state, they let certain things, certain kinds of hate speech or certain kinds of messaging go scot-free, and then they shut down others. So we saw, for example, in a recent, I think I saw it on the newspapers in the Wall Street Journal, the recent sort of event about Facebook India executive Anki Das, who had let certain kinds of hate speech by particular politicians, you know, go through. I think the other thing to remember is that even in the standards, the idea of community standards, when people remove posts or when they suspend accounts, I remember seeing this documentary where they had outsourced this activity to somewhere in, I think, Malaysia or Indonesia. and they were removing kind of posts that had to do with human right violations. So, at the same time as they're saying these are graphic images or violent images, these are actually images shared by human rights activists, for example, and those accounts were being suspended, or those kinds of things were being removed. So beyond the actual state itself doing these kinds of autocratic things like internet shutdowns, or even conducting mass surveillance. The state already had the capacity for that kind of networks of surveillance before the net kind of flowered. But you take that and then you put this layer of surveillance on top, and then you take these companies, sometimes or often in collusion with the state, then you get really a kind of I would say this kind of explosive situation. It's not necessarily a conspiracy theory, but it's very much a reality, as it were. And I agree with Uzair Saab when he talks about the fact that it's the idea of privacy is. The thing that I want to say there is that it's not about the public-private idea. Was an idea that was a very bourgeois idea, which emerged in this sense of कि हम घर में जो करते हैं वो separate है, जो बाहर करते हैं separate है. Now you have this thing, आपका phone, you're sleeping with it, you're whatever. I mean, that line, you're putting likes, that data is being transmitted somewhere, it's harvested. So the line between public and private is not there anymore. If you want a kind of privacy, if you want the state not to be snooping on you, then you shut your phone in the fridge. I mean, that was a tip given to me by someone who said, if you put it in the fridge, you won't, it won't be snooping on you. But but that's the level at which I think there are UN human rights experts, for example, who talk about collective punishment and who talk about the internet as a right. It's a basic right, to be able to access all these different services, whether it's business or health or whatever. But it's a basic right. But that right, on the flip side of that right, is this level of I guess you want to call it autocratic behavior by the state. I hope that answers what you were trying to ask.
Yeah, I think pretty much. So it's more of an indispensable evil, or like something like a poison that's honey coated. You can't get away from that in any way. So, Uzair.
Actually, it feels like so because everybody is related to it nowadays. I would like just add one more point, is that we are actually, they have made technology like so that it attracts everybody. So I was teaching this one subject just I guess 5 years back in university. That's called Pervasive Computing, in which basically pervasive means that that internet is present everywhere. So there was one of these topics where it said that in the near future that every other device like Goldie Ma'am was talking about this taking your phone and keeping it in the freezer of a fridge. But I would say that that would also be a blunder, because in the near future, it has already happened in certain technological advanced companies, states like countries like China, etc., that even the internet, even the refrigerator is connected to the internet. So I would probably suggest to go on the top of a mountain where there is not a tower of 5G tower there. So basically, what they do is they make this technology very attractive. Like and the other person who is not using the internet, like my grandfather who was not using the internet, he didn't even have a mobile phone. He didn't have a landline phone used ever in his life. But when he sees me doing certain things, first he says, "What are you doing?" And next day he's using it more than me. Like my father used to actually complain about me that I'm always playing games on my laptop when I was a kid, when I was studying. And 3 years back, I purchased a phone, and he is now more into YouTube than I ever was. So it's basically even the generations don't actually define anything, because it's so much attractive that the only way that you can get out of it is, first, don't look at it all, and then go to a mountain where there is no connectivity. I would say go into the Amazon forest as well. Thank you.
Maybe they're trying to reach there as well, because we are seeing many documentaries which are running live. So the privacy, like, ये एक यूटोपिया सा बन रहा है. यहाँ पर यासिर मैं आपके पास आना चाहूँगा. I would like to ask you something in relation to this. जैसे उज़ैर भी बात कर रहे थे कि ये data, connections, in a way हम सारे connect हो चुके हैं. Now, in order to understand कि ये data फिर process कैसे होता है, ये company जो है जिनको मैं अपना data दे रहा हूँ, for example हम social media use कर रहे हैं, आप Facebook की बात कर रहे हैं, WhatsApp की बात कर रहे हैं, या emails हम use करते हैं, तो ये information use कैसे होती है. और इसी से related एक दूसरा सवाल है जो रियाज साहब हैं, उन्होंने हमें comments में पूछा है कि ये जो ये data harvesting है, अब कुछ ऐसा डेटा है जो मैं नहीं चाहूंगा कि वो हार्वेस्ट हो या जो एक्सप्लॉइट कर रही हैं कंपनीज, तो उसको भी कैसे लाइक चेक किया जा सकता है. स्टॉप तो नहीं किया जा सकता, बट किस तरीके से चेक किया जा सकता है कि एक्सप्लॉइटेशन ना हो, अनवांटेड एक्सप्लॉइटेशन ना हो.
पहले मैं एक बात ऐड करूंगा जो उज़ैर साहब अभी बता रहे थे कि लाइक टेक्नोलॉजी इस टाइम जो चल रही है, लाइक वो एक दूसरे को इम्प्रेस करती है कि लाइक हमारे ग्रैंडफादर्स उनके पास तो इंटरनेट नहीं था, बट दे हैड ब्रॉडबैंड लैंडलाइन दैट टाइम. सो बट मेन concept is the surveillance system was happening that time also. So surveillance was happening from day first. When we had a little bit of technology, surveillance was part of that. So पहले taping होती थी, तो right now there has been improvement in technology, and right now there has been improvement in surveillance system. Now I'm coming back to your question. Basically what happens, the data which these companies harvest, they check our likes and dislikes. Like maybe you may have seen, like you are searching Amazon, and the same ad you are seeing on Google कि आप वही jeans Amazon पे भी देख रहे हो और same jeans आपको Google ad provide करता है. Now you are shocked how Google got to know about these things. आपने तो अभी jeans का like Adidas का jeans search किया था, तो how these ads are coming relevant. So basically what happens, what these companies do, they search, they like do like research on you. They have their data mining, like first they check your social media profiles. When you are like using shopping sites, they get the data from there. Like recently somebody was posting on Twitter that he had done shopping on Snapdeal, and the next day he got some random calls from others like आप ये वाली jeans हमसे ले लो, आप Snapdeal से नहीं ले लो. So there a person like gets shocked कि मेरा data कहाँ Snapdeal से कहाँ चला गया इनके पास. So basically what happens when you are signing up on Facebook, so they have you seen like there's from day first there is an ad on WhatsApp. Nobody has right now seen ad on WhatsApp. So why WhatsApp is giving us like they are investing a lot of money on providing these services to us. So what's उनको क्या चिट्ठी पड़ी है कि हमें ये WhatsApp यूज करने को दे दो. They are not earning anything from it, but now they have like I think more than 1 to 2 million people data they have on there. So what they use, they tomorrow like if elections happens, they that time see but इस person की need क्या है. So from these things when a data comes in one place, like India में आधार है, तो गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया को पता है कि हमें मेरी जो प्राइवेसी है वो तो पहले ही इन्वेड हो चुकी है, तो वो इन चीजों पे रिसर्च करते हैं. फिर वो एक डेटा दूसरी कंपनी से लेके बाय करते हैं, या कोई वो हैकिंग कंपनी को हायर अप करते हैं कि ये डेटा यहाँ से निकालो. सो फ्रॉम दीज कंपनीज दे हार्वेस्ट डेटा एंड देन मैच विथ ईच अदर, एंड देन दे गो ऑन विथ देयर लाइक कैसे अगर उनका बिजनेस चल रहा है तो बिजनेस पे यूज करेंगे, अगर इलेक्शंस चल रहे हैं तो इलेक्शंस पे यूज हो रहे हैं. सो इन दीज डेज लाइक व्हेन इलेक्शंस स्टार्ट हैपनिंग दैट देयर इज लॉट ऑफ कंट्रोवर्सी लाइक अमेरिकन इलेक्शन प्रेसिडेंशियल elections are तो there's a lot of controversy like now in free speech. Twitter and Facebook are messing each other on like free speech. So why on these times. पहले तो ऐसा नहीं होता था. Like last time Cambridge Analytica का scam हुआ था, या Google जो Google Plus की सर्विस है उनको क्यों बंद करना पड़ा? Because they lost lot of data. So the data which actually goes from your mobile phones, that's being, everything is being monitored. आपने कभी देखा होगा कि आप कभी सर्च करते हो, then next time you like refresh on Facebook, वो वहीं पे रहता है. So whatever you type on Facebook or Twitter or Google search engine, that remains saved there. वो जो भी आप चाहे वो सही search है, चाहे वो, that gives them purely information about your profile, about yourself, about your likes, about your, or what you want to see, what you want to like see in future. And किसी ने सवाल पूछा था कि how these companies, what do they do with the data? Was this the question?
जी बिल्कुल यही क्वेश्चन था, वो कैसे इसको एक्सप्लॉइट करते हैं और उस चीज को रोक कैसे सकते हैं.
It starts from yourself. Like right now I think we have already given our information to these companies. Like जब हम sign up करते हैं तो हम उस time कुछ पढ़ते ही नहीं है. Like terms and conditions का पेज होता है तो nobody reads that. Even I am not reading myself, because I know, because they have every access to our devices. जैसे अभी उज़ैर साहब ताहिर साहब को बता रहे थे कि that he is using his like to remotely like mute and unmute his mic. So that's what it actually happens. But when you are into technology, you have to face all these things. You cannot stop it. Like if you are giving yourself, like you need to learn, like safe practicing, like incognito modes. These are the things how you can protect yourself. Like when you are providing email address, you can have a different email address for social media accounts. You can have a different email for shopping websites. Like I will add also, like if when you are accessing any website, that website's already like watching you, what you are doing on their websites. So they actually know what you are searching, how they make like their AI better, so that they can provide you that those products which you are searching, actually what you had searched. Maybe they are checking your browsing history. We have nobody has right now these type of data, because every company is saying that they are not illegally using our data, but at the end every company is using for their benefits. This is what happens. Like at least what you can do, you need to learn safe practicing. You need to differentiate between what's a real website and what's not a real website. Nowadays main companies are teaching people, they are like dumping the data, like Amazon, Google. They are not able to protect our data, but maybe sometimes some hacking attempts happen and they then claim that they lost 60,000 user data. So what happens that time? Nothing. Nobody is taking cognizance of these things. Even many companies were sued. In Kashmir it regularly happens. Our data is already with them. We have given them when we made Aadhaar, like we have already given them. Yeah, Kashmir में तो किसी की security ही नहीं है. So to say, like now we need to, or only what we can do, we can learn safe practicing on internet, like which website to access and which not to access. That's how we can save ourselves from these cyber attacks.
थैंक यू. या सर, थोड़ा ये अपना एक एक्सपीरियंस में यहाँ पे थोड़ा एनेक्डोट ऐड करूँ. लास्ट टाइम किसी ने मुझे बताया था कि यहाँ पे एक ऐसा ना सर्च इंजन है जो आपकी जो एक्टिविटी है उसको ट्रैक नहीं करता है. सो आई हैड टू सर्च फॉर दैट पर्टिकुलर सर्च इंजन ऑन गूगल. सो डक डक गो एक करके वो है.
yes, that's a Chinese.
So उसके बाद गूगल ने मुझे ऐड देना शुरू कर दिया कि how you can save your privacy through these alternative search engines, which was quite ironic actually. Like they already know I am looking for privacy. And so यहाँ पे उज़ैर साहब को ऑडियंस क्वेश्चन में करना चाहता हूँ. शाह उमर एक हमारे ऑडियंस मेंबर है अभी, और उनने सवाल किया है कि जैसे अब हमें पता है, हम अभी बात कर रहे जूम पे, और स्टूडेंट्स जो है कश्मीर में, चाहे वो इंडिया में हो या पूरी दुनिया में हो, जूम यूज कर रहे ज्यादातर या ऐसी एप्स यूज कर रहे. तो देयर वाज सम कंट्रोवर्सी रिलेटेड टू प्राइवेसी जो जूम की है, तो उसका क्या हुआ? वाज दैट रिजॉल्व्ड और इज इट स्टिल देयर?
Yeah, before answering that question, I would actually again reiterate my call that as Yasir Saab suggested, I don't agree with that, that we should use a separate email ID and then that would help, because then you might think of a next step that again you're using the same device, then the hardware is same, and now you will think of purchasing a next phone. obviously next hardware, but the location is the same. You cannot, you can, as I said in a very clear and a crisp statement, that you cannot actually bypass this. I am I am giving you 100% surety of that. And this connects me to my answer that about the controversy of the Zoom. I think in my districts, I was the only one who actually created this controversy, because that time I was actually dealing with my research paper, and this came into my site that Zoom is actually prone to this intrusions more. So I actually, when they started actually giving orders that everybody in the faculty should use Zoom, so I was of the opinion that we should not use it and we should move with Classroom, knowing that Google Classroom is again not a safe thing. But the only thing which matters here is Google is basically a very prominent, one of the popular organizations, and everybody is actually questioning Google nowadays, or the CEO of Facebook, because these are prominent names. Nobody actually, even if I ask any of the panelists now that who is the CEO of Zoom, nobody knows about him, because probably he has not been into the news. Nobody has dragged him to the court. But Mark Zuckerberg is a very famous personality, because he has recently into the news that US elections were rigged because of some Facebook editing, etc. So I here as Tawseef sir presented it at a very initial, that is there is a matter of preference, or a matter of choice, or some you can say the status. Somebody would say iPhone is better than any other device like an MI phone. So it's probably not that case. So what steps could we actually take is we could take a third party VPN, and we could actually use that as a shield in our mobile phones. So that's basically using some third party app, and again trusting that third party app that they won't use your data, or somebody won't hack into their servers and use their data. Now this is basically what you read on paper. Like, for example, if I give you an example, somebody called me in the initial days when actually this post lockdown, when this article 370 was abrogated, and they were talking about when VPNs were actually flooded here in Kashmir, installation of VPNs. So everybody was calling me, which is the better VPN, which is the better VPN. So I had my research done. So I said, it was actually I would say an outcome of my research. Somebody else would actually suggest someone else. So NordVPN was one of the VPNs I actually looked into, and it has some military grade algorithms. And then after 4 months, I saw that ExpressVPN is better than NordVPN. So it's basically now at some point we have actually believe ourselves that everything is right when it is not. So even if we are using VPN, so we have to assure ourselves, nobody else, that okay, we are safe now, but we are not safe. So in terms of Zoom, what a person can do is they can install these VPNs, and they can probably look. One of the things that happens to us is that when we initially install any new app, even if we open a new email ID, we don't usually go into the settings. I would suggest everybody to, when they go fresh into something, like installing an app, or opening a Facebook account, or like going to open their email accounts. First of all, go to the settings, change every setting that you understand, and that helps your soul understand that okay, you are safe now. Otherwise, next step, you can believe that everything is fine. You can close your eyes, and that's it.
Thank you so very much, Uzair, for the pep talk. So anyways, the big brother is watching. There's no escape. We can only shut our eyes to it. Bad reality. So यहाँ पे Goldie, I'll come to you. So when we see कि like एक paradigm सा shift हो रहा है, हमारी दुनिया, हमारी जिंदगियाँ, our everyday life, like everything of us is known to the other. अगर हम MNCs, TNCs, IT giants, या even states की बात करें, then is the data, like इस level का data इस time पर available है हम लोगों के बारे में कि एक virtual तौसीफ, एक virtual Goldie, वो पूरा sketch बना हुआ है. मेरी likes क्या है, मेरे dislikes क्या है, मेरी political ideology, मेरे thoughts क्या हैं, किस दिन में क्या करता हूँ, shopping क्या है, मैं खाना क्या prefer करता हूँ, everything of that sort, where I travel. अब ये चीजें हैं कि ये डेटा इन कंपनीज के लिए भी अहम होता है या स्टेट्स के लिए भी अहम होता है. नाउ दिस डेटा शेयरिंग एंड data storage, how do you see these things shaping the geopolitics in the coming years or even in the current times?
Yeah, I mean, I think we were just speaking briefly about this earlier. So the idea of, data is power, and I will say the old sort of knowledge is power kind of understanding, to think about data as power and big data as power. So it's not only about, one thing is that the person who stores the data obviously has or is harvesting the data and being able to store it has that kind of power. But I think the more important thing is to think about which countries then make agreements for data sharing with, which country. So that kind of organizes this idea of blocks of particular countries, then grouping in relation to each other. I was mentioning earlier as well this idea of, I think during the Cold War, you had the Five Eye Nation agreement. Again, it was a surveillance-based sharing agreement of data between the US, the UK, Australia, New Zealand, and a couple of other countries, and maybe France, I think, I'm not sure. But the idea of five eyes was quite interesting to me. This idea that you have 5 pairs of eyes. I don't know if, like at that point, it's quite a chilling kind of understanding. These eyes are constantly everywhere all around you. So even as we're speaking to each other, there are these eyes now extracting data, whether it's the Zoom CEO or Zoom itself and so on. So when we talk about data sharing, I think that's where we can understand networks of power, right? Networks of power and blocks of power. And I think this is maybe the way in which we can think about contemporary geopolitics generally. I don't think it's in the future. I think it's already here, right? So when we think about Israel having agreements with, or the Israeli company, I think Yasser Sab mentioned Pegasus and the spyware there, and that was used, for example, to track the journalist Jamal Khashoggi in Saudi Arabia and the whole incident and the scandalous kind of ways in which he was murdered. I mean, that just shows you the ways in which there are no neat blocks either. I think that's the important way to think about it. There are no neat blocks, and that we can identify which countries are, having data sharing agreements with which countries and so on. And often they won't surprise us necessarily, but they will be startling that we don't have the older regional blocks between the West and the rest, for example, right? I think that's one of the things that we need to get away from. I'm in the UK, and there's a lot of talk about decolonization, which is good actually, because there needs to be a lot of decolonizing of the curriculum in the UK. But at the same time, we need to be wary of just looking at the world in these binary ways. I think it's much more complicated. I think there are much more of these kinds of agreements between countries that disturb that idea of the rest and the West. But it's also about power sharing. And I would really, I have called it a particular kind of a new form of geocolonialism, like a geocolonial formation. And I think we need to think about that in relation to data as well. I know I've been more general, but perhaps the others can be more specific about these issues. But I think I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Goldie. Now I will come to Yasser, and I will ask you about the law, from the law perspective. So in Europe, we have this GDPR, General Data Protection Regulation. So in the context of India, what are the legal mechanisms through which our data can be protected? Are these mechanisms competent or good enough to protect our data?
Can you, Tahir, please, because I was not able to
Yeah.
hear you.
Yeah, so Yasir, I'm asking you about, in Europe, they have this GDPR, General Data Protection Regulation, which came into effect in 2018, and which actually, gives more it is kind of more transparent in the way data will be used and transferred and all that. So, जो इंडिया के कॉन्टेक्स्ट में अगर देखा जाए तो कोई ऐसा कानून है या कोई लीगल मैकेनिज्म है कि जिसके कॉन्टेक्स्ट में या जिसके तौर पर या जिसके तर्ज पर फिर जो डेटा है यूजर्स का उसको प्रोटेक्ट किया जाए या प्राइवेसी है उसको प्रोटेक्ट किया जाए, और कितना कॉम्पिटेंट रहेगा अगर कोई ऐसा मैकेनिज्म आता भी है?
I think right now there is no such law like that. If you are if you got damaged from any company who harvests your data and who helps compensate, I think there is no like in Europe or in any other countries there are some like laws. That's why we are seeing like some message that tells us that they will use our cookies or not. That's why, because of that law. But in Indian context, there is no such law. But recently, there has been an amendment regarding this. I think that right to privacy that has been added to the fundamental rights list. And there are many IT laws that like we can, if we feel like anybody is using our data, we can sue that. But in real context, there has been no such cases emerging. Only the Aadhaar case that the Aadhaar company has lost. That's why there has been made right to privacy has been made a fundamental right. But basically, in Indian context, there is no availability of any such law. Like if in Europe we will see like they have made websites implement those features, like they need to take consent from a user that they will use cookies or not. Basically, I want to tell our users what actually somebody had already asked this question, like if the website is already using our cookies, so how we are safe? Basically, as a developer, I would say using cookies, we use just, I think Uzair Saab is also aware about this. We use just for better interaction, like to interact between a website, how it interacts with the user, or how we differentiate one user from another user, one providing privilege to the one user and removing those privileges to another user. Because of these things, we use for better performance. And for the law, there is no Indian law. Just there is right to privacy and there is some IT law. But right now, there has been no like outcome of this. Nobody has been sued. Like many people lost data to these cyber attacks. Like recently in India, Rahul Gandhi's sister got attacked. Gautam Naulakha, his iPhone was hacked. What has happened? No legal cognizance has been taken regarding this. Neither in Supreme Court anybody has like lodged any case against WhatsApp. Only just WhatsApp has just inquired about Israeli NSO company that they have sued them. Right now, that's in International Court of Justice. Let's see what will happen. But right now, it is. I think there's no such law that sues if we can sue any company for this. Maybe in future they will enhance any. They will do amendment to this, because right now that's emerging. Because in COVID we got to know how important it is to like remain active on your virtual networks. How we have to save our servers. Also, Mr. Uzair Saab was telling about VPNs. There are many VPNs which were already dumping our data. So I think when everything we have lost, it is like there are many apps like on Play Store who are already dumping our data. Money has been suspended by Google. Like we are just believing Google, whatever Google or Facebook or any of these websites are telling, we are believing them. So at the end, it depends on those companies how they will harvest. If they are harvesting our data, if they have planned to harvest our data, so we can't do nothing, because our dependence on these things have already been made. We are like made. You have to use, because the future is like Internet of Things is everywhere. Like our computers, our refrigerators, our mobile phones, everything is now correlated embedded in a single system. So it's hard. I think it's hard to replace these things. Maybe in future there will be some change where we can sue any company, or there will be some law in India, in South Asia also. So maybe there will be some laws that will help an individual to sue these companies who are harvesting our data. Maybe they will take a lesson. That's we can hope for this. Right now there's just right to privacy, and there is some, I think that's IT law that comes in 22A, that's a part of IPC. So maybe that would be helpful for individuals if they feel maybe they can use that law. But right now there has been no cases in Supreme Court of India, just that Aadhaar case.
थैंक यू वेरी मच यासिर, शुक्रिया। उज़ैर, यहाँ पर मैं आपके पास आना चाहूँगा, क्योंकि अभी हम देख रहे हैं कि सिचुएशन क्या है, किस हिसाब का है, कि थोड़ा थोड़ा अब एक आम इंसान खुद को कैसे प्रोटेक्ट करेगा, या कैसे उसको लगेगा कि जितना मेरा बाहर निकलना चाहिए था कुछ तो बचा, कुछ तो मैंने रिटेन किया अपने पास। अभी के ईरा में जब हम बात करें ग्लोबली, तो ऐसे आईटी टेक जायंट्स खड़े हुए हैं कि जो आपको सारी सर्विसेज खुद प्रोवाइड करते हैं। फॉर एग्जांपल, अब अगर फेसबुक की हम लें कि वो सारी, लाइक व्हाट्सएप भी उन्हीं का है, इंस्टाग्राम भी उन्हीं का है, तो आप जितना यूज करते हैं वो सारा उन्हीं के पास पहुंचता है। इसी तरीके से अगर हम इंटरनेट या ये डेटा सर्विस प्रोवाइडर्स की बात करें, फॉर एग्जांपल AT&T यूएस में देखें, या यहाँ वोडाफोन, वो कितनी बड़ी कंपनी है, किस तरह मोनोपोलाइज करते हैं डिफरेंट सेक्टर्स को। इसी तरीके से इन आवर पार्ट ऑफ द वर्ल्ड, अगर हम बात करें कश्मीर की, वहाँ भी इसी तरीके से हम देखते हैं। क्या ये कि एक ही सर्विस प्रोवाइडर हमें मोबाइल भी देता है, हमें इंटरनेट भी देता है, हमें ब्रॉडबैंड भी देता है, लैंडलाइन भी देता है और टीवी भी देता है, लेट्स से कंपनी ए मुझे ये सारी सर्विसेज दे रही है, क्या ये मुझे ज्यादा वल्नरेबल बनाता है कि इनको मेरा सारा डेटा चला जाएगा, मेरी सारी चीजें इनको ज्यादा पता है, और लाइक वो मुझे ज्यादा वल्नरेबल बनाता है टू द ब्रीच ऑफ दिस लाइक प्राइवेसी? या अगर मैं उस तरीके से इसको ऐसे कर सकता हूँ कि मैं इंटरनेट एक से लूँ, मोबाइल दूसरे से, लैंडलाइन तीसरे से, और शायद टीवी में चौथी कंपनी का यूज कर रहा हूँ, चौथे सर्विस प्रोवाइडर का, क्या वो मुझे थोड़ा सा इसके कंपैरिजन में सिक्योर बनाता है, या थोड़ा वो ब्रीच को रोक सकता है किसी तरीके से?
No, I don't think this will affect in any way, because at the end of the day, as I said in my earlier statements, that basically internet is a platform. It doesn't matter you take it from Geo, you take it from Airtel. You are actually using a universal road, and it doesn't matter the car you buy from any company. You buy a Hyundai car, you buy a Ford car, you buy a car which is a left-hand drive from US, or you buy something else. It as long as you are using the internet, it does not matter at all. And as I said, that there is a concept of pervasive computing, which is actually going to be implemented in 5 years, where basically we had this IP version 4, where we had approximately 4.2 billion IP addresses all over the world, and they were consumed within 5 years, and they are now moving towards IP version 6, in which it is said that the total number of IP addresses that IPv4 had, a single person on this planet would have exactly the same number of IP addresses as were total in the IP version 4. That means a single person will have at his disposal around 4.2 billion IP addresses. What are they for? They are for all the devices he will use at home, a car. Even I was reading an article 5 years back where it was saying that clothes you will be wearing will have an IP address. So I don't think purchasing a device from one vendor and purchasing something from else from other, as long as you are connected to the internet, because at the end of the day, if, for example, Yasir Saab had a problem connecting with the internet, so you were telling him to connect through a 2G network, a mobile network, which is way slower, but he is connected. You're not hearing his voice, you're not looking at his visuals, but he is connected. So it doesn't matter you use a slow internet, it doesn't matter you use a fast internet. The matter is that you are connected to the internet. And my first statement again goes here, that if you are connected to the internet, you are connected to the President of the United States. You only don't know it. And those attackers who know it, they are actually using this to exploit everything. For example, an attacker might know that currently X and Y and Z person is connected to the internet, so he has a good balance in his bank account. So let us rig him. So what matters here is that you are connected to the internet, and internet is your savior, and internet is your killer. So I don't think any other thing matters, because like if you talk about internet blockade in Kashmir, so you would want if there was no internet, and basically what are you crying nowadays about, that there is an internet blockade in Kashmir and this is a problem. But those who for whom you are using 2G internet and you are getting a call out there to human right activists, etc., this is a boon. So for some who want the internet now at this point in Kashmir, that's so that their voice is heard, so they would want the internet. And for Indian government or any other government, they would want this internet to be blocked right now. So until just a couple of months back, when internet was not working, so Indian government was very happy, and Kashmiris were very disappointed by the decision. Now that 2G has come, you would see floods of these illegal things happening in Kashmir, that has happened in the past in Kashmir. So basically the problem is the internet. Problem is not the devices or the vendor, etc. I hope I understood the question right.
Yeah, it's perfectly all right what you say, and I completely agree with it. Well, my point here is, for example, if we say in relation to Kashmir, or some if we talk about some problematic areas, one provider providing you, for example, company A providing you internet, landline, broadband, mobile, and TV services. Do you think that that makes a family, that makes a person, an individual, more vulnerable than having, for example, if I use the TV from Airtel, if I use the mobile from Geo, if I use the landline from BSNL, because it doesn't, in a sense, give this entire consolidated information to just one provider about me. So that's what my point was when we see it in relation to problematic areas. For example, if one company is coming and giving me every service.
I'm sorry, actually my voice broke. Are you still talking to me?
Perfectly all right. Okay. So am I audible to you now?
No, you are. I heard your question, but were you still asking this question to me, or you actually passed it on?
आप ही से पूछो.
Okay. So basically, the only thing I see here is that if you take, for example, I will take an example of the most popular country right now in company right now in Kashmir, is that is JioFiber. So everybody is actually purchasing this connection, internet connection from Jio, and they are providing the cable as well as everything else. I would say think only one thing is that if the government wants this data from a particular user, so they would only approach, say for example, Mukesh Ambani, who happens to be an ally of the government. So I think that is the only thing that government will be actually happy with. Otherwise, even if you purchase a TV from Airtel or a cable connection from Airtel or broadband from somebody else, the only thing they will have to do is take a few steps and call this data out from different companies. I'll say this is the only difference.
थैंक यू उज़ैर एंड आपने जितना भी हमें आज समझाया वो मुझे उम्मीद है कि जो हमारी ऑडियंस है उनको एक बेटर इन्फॉर्म्ड डिसीजन लेना जो उनको होगा वो लेंगे इसकी बुनियाद पे जो आपने इंफॉर्मेशन और जो एक्सपर्ट ओपिनियन आज शेयर की. सो माय क्वेश्चन इज टू गोल्डी. उज़ैर साहब बोलते हैं
कि one more thing I actually skipped because Yasir साहब pointed that out is that I suggested using some VPNs and there were some VPNs already dumping data. One thing Kashmiris need to understand and is that they need to spend a few bucks on these third-party apps. Everything is not going to be free on the internet. And one thing, and the second thing is, if you are purchasing an VPN or any other service, just purchase it, like I said in the beginning, purchase it from a popular organization like Google, etc. Or in this case, I suggested Nord or ExpressVPN, because tomorrow you can actually identify those organizations and sue them, which is actually of no use. But still, you can actually identify them. If in contrast, if you actually purchase it from somebody who is unknown and you don't actually find him on the internet tomorrow.
Yeah, thanks for that information, Uzair. So Uzair साहब ने कहा कि जब हम इंटरनेट के से कनेक्ट होते हैं तो हम डायरेक्टली प्रेसिडेंट ऑफ यूनाइटेड स्टेट्स से कनेक्ट होते हैं. तो नाउ लेट अस टॉक अबाउट यूनाइटेड स्टेट्स फॉर अ मोमेंट एंड माय क्वेश्चन इज टू गोल्डी. So जो हम political implications की बात कर रहे हैं आपके साथ, तो data कैसे use होता है by how it is used by the political parties or how is it used to do political maneuverings. जैसे कि US में जो election हुआ उसके बारे में कहा गया कि there was certain kind of manipulation done. So tell our audiences something about this.
Yeah, thank you for that, Tahir. I just wanted to add one point also more to what Uzair Saab just said. And
Sure.
I think one of the things that for me was very interesting when you talked about this monopoly in effect of Geo providing everything, all the different, like services or whatever. And it was reminding me of this thing when it, it it was reminding me of the invasions of Iraq and Afghanistan. Not exactly it's not the same thing, obviously, but the reason why it was reminding me of that was I was just thinking about how you take the idea of surveillance capitalism and then you put on top a layer of disaster capitalism, which is Naomi Klein's concept, which is you destroy what is there and then you then award contracts to certain companies, right? And that is exactly, Naomi Klein talks about it in relation to neoliberalism, etc. But when in this context, you can think about how we need to extend the idea of surveillance capitalism to think about disaster capitalism in terms of technology, and maybe people can think about that as just as a way of thinking of monopolies which are awarded when you've done all this destruction through the shutdown, for example. In terms of political maneuverings, I mean, this is the perfect example of a political maneuvering, what I just mentioned. But in the US elections, or for that matter, in the Indian elections in 2019, I mean, the US elections, I mean, you have Cambridge. I think most people might be already familiar with the story of Cambridge Analytica. It's a story of many twists and turns. But they're a subsidiary company of a British PsyOps company called SCL, Strategic Communication Laboratories. And when I say PsyOps, I mean, that's war terminology, so they're behavioral strategists or researchers. The SCL actually has a military arm and they work with NATO and with the defense departments of their member states and so on. So in that sense, this the Cambridge Analytica scandal was about harvesting data through a Facebook app which was called This Is Your Digital Life. So aap log sab apne pictures dalo us pe, and then you have this is my life in digital terms and so on. But it was a personality quiz, and they spent 1 million on that data collection, and they were looking for particular kinds of likes to build profiles of the users who they could then target, and these were the swing voters that they were targeting. And the person who funded, so Cambridge Analytica worked with Donald Trump's election team. The project was funded by Robert Mercer, who was a billionaire friend of the president. They worked with Breitbart, the right-wing news outlet headed by Steve Bannon, who's been called a white supremacist. So all of these factors together is credited with the win of the US elections by Trump. But I think we need to think about political maneuverings a bit more broadly. I mean, that's a textbook example now, and Cambridge Analytica is also linked with Brexit, for example, in the UK. But I think we need to talk about data and political maneuvering more broadly. So my understanding is, I mean, this was a research project done by people at LSE, the London School of Economics. They reviewed like some 1,000 WhatsApp forwards in the Indian elections in 2019. And they found that, there was lots of, you all are much more familiar with this than I am, perhaps the WhatsApp University, but they found all these forwards. But what they found was interesting about it was not that, a lot of it might have been fake news or misinformation or disinformation. But what they found striking was it wasn't so much that people, even if people knew that something was fake, even if they knew it was disinformation, they still forwarded these things because it's not based on whether something is real or not. And some sort of academics or researchers call this, the kind of post-truth era in that sense, because the intention was not that, oh, let me see if this is fake or not, or the intention or motivation is a very anti-minority, at least in the Indian elections, resentment, suspicion, disgust, contempt, hate speech, hatred, all of these things put together. We know that, again, recently, I can't remember if I've already mentioned this story. I think I already just mentioned it, the Facebook India executive who was basically letting through the hate speech of certain politicians, or not stopping it, or not preventing it, or not removing it. So these kinds of political maneuverings have become so commonplace, I think, in many countries around the world. So it's really something that is important to understand and think about. Yeah, I'll stop there. I mean, I could go on and on about how, Kashmir was also a very important part of the Indian elections, but maybe I will let that be for now.
Let's surmise that that's understood.
Yeah.
Thank you so very much, Goldie. यहाँ यासिर मैं आपकी तरफ आना चाहूँगा. We realize कि हमने 1 घंटा पार कर लिया, so this will be the last round of questions and then we'll wind it up. So the last question to you, Yasir. अक्सर अभी हम जब बात करते हैं, हम end-to-end encryptions की बात करते हैं. For example, there are many apps, Telegram, WhatsApp, Facebook, या messengers कुछ मुख्तलिफ किस्म के हैं जो कहते हैं कि there is an end-to-end encryption, which means आपका data पूरा protected है, what you're doing, nobody else other than the two at the two ends of it, आपके बगैर ये चीज़ कोई और नहीं देख सकता है. क्या ये सच में ये end-to-end encryption सबसे पहली चीज़ ये है क्या? ये सच में हमारा डेटा प्रोटेक्ट करती है क्या? इसको कोई including the company और कोई third party नहीं देखती?
First, there was somebody who had asked a question on DPB. I would like to respond to him on just on Facebook. That DPB has been just introduced in the parliament. That's not just finalized yet. Maybe India will finalize it in this session. So to say that one can use that bill right now, I think that's not a that would be issue because that has not been passed by the parliament. So now coming back to your question, Tausif, actually from developers point of view, as a developer, if I say everything is protected, like if we have developed an app like WhatsApp has end-to-end encryption, so I think the company knows how they have made this. Company can, and because they have the data, so they can access it anytime. From developers' point of view, I'm just saying. But from company's perspective, maybe they have this policy that they won't see this until and unless they have this encryption key, because they are generating that encryption key that is being provided to me and my that person whom I am having conversation. Like right now, I just say that the suggestible ad that's being suggested by many human rights activists or any cybersecurity specialists, that Signal is having a perfect security. Like there are many people have been such. Before it was Telegram. Now Telegram has openly supported that they will provide any data to the government. So to say from developers' point of view, I would say it's like it's up to company. So if they have everything, like if I am developing any app, I know how we have made that I can breach that, I can get that encryption key and decrypt the whole chatting scenario. Right now we have recently seen that Facebook has collaborated with BJP government, allowed the hate speech spreading around India. So for the sake of like capitalism, surveillance capitalism, for the sake of profiteering, they can do anything they can do. But right now I think better my suggestion would be reserved. Like I won't be like targeting WhatsApp or Signal or any company that they are like harvesting or they are providing any government data. Right now there has been no evidence, but there are other cases like emerging, like Jamal Khashoggi, his phone was hacked, right? Priyanka Gandhi's phone was hacked, or Gautam Nola Kha's phone was hacked. They can use, like many companies use other exploits, other vulnerabilities, or other malwares to target these individuals. My opinion regarding this would be it's up to the company how they want to run their business. If they want profiteering, then it's obvious they can leak the chats, they can get the information of that person whosoever the government wants.
थैंक यू यासर। बिल्कुल ये तो क्या मतलब जो ये कंपनीज होती है ये प्रॉफिट कमाने के गर्ज से आती है, इन्वेस्ट करती है, सो हम ये एक्सपेक्ट नहीं करते हैं कि वो सारे एथिकली सब कुछ फॉलो
They will
करेंगे।
be following, yeah, true.
या सो जो चूंकि हाँ ये लास्ट राउंड चल रहा है, सो लास्ट मेरा क्वेश्चन है उजैर साहब से कि जो फेशियल रिकॉग्निशन वाला जो टेक्नोलॉजी है, इट्स अ पावरफुल टूल ऑफ सर्विलेंस, जो चाइना भी कहा जाता है कि उइघुर्स के जहाँ पे ना शिनजांग में यूज़ करते हैं। तो ये जो टेक्नोलॉजी है, आप हमारे ऑडियंस को बिल्कुल मतलब सिंपल लैंग्वेज में समझा दीजिए कि ये फेशियल रिकॉग्निशन वाली टेक्नोलॉजी है क्या, इसके क्या इम्प्लीकेशंस हैं और कैसे ये काम करती है। जैसे कि चाइना में बताया जाता है कि इट इज अलाउइंग चाइनीज गवर्नमेंट टू कीप ट्रैक ऑफ द पीपल इन शिनजांग पर्टिकुलरली।
Yeah, before answering that, can I add a little more bit on that encryption?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, basically, the question had actually answered before that. We were talking about this Pegasus Pegasus malware, and then we said that we have no data about that WhatsApp has. There is any app that has not been that is actually an encrypted app, but we don't have data that that data was leaked. But Pegasus itself speaks everything. So basically, we need to understand here is that there is two levels to it. One is that that is called a hardware end-to-end encryption, in which basically a device on which you are using the app is actually encrypting everything. And then there is the software, that's the WhatsApp, for example. So what happened is basically Pegasus was not actually able to, as per my knowledge, Pegasus was not able to hack into the encrypted data, but they were able to hack onto the mobile phone and take the temporary data from there and actually harvest it. So if everybody remembers, there were once riots in UK, and those riots, I would say, and they actually spread out quite fast. The reason was they were using, if you had read that in the news, that they were using BlackBerry devices, and BlackBerry actually is the only device which was using hardware end-to-end encryption. That means even the softwares on that device would actually keep their data somewhere in the device, and the device is encrypted. And BlackBerry had that that legal binding that it would not actually release anybody's data. That is why the rights actually spread out that fast. And then later on, after a few years, you see that BlackBerry nowhere exists. So there is basically some political side to this as well. You can understand from this definition. So this was adding to this encryption. Basically one at the physical level, at the device level, and then carrying it forward to the software, and then beyond that. So that was about encryption. Then you were talking about this facial recognition. I'm not I don't agree that only China is using it on Uyghurs. Basically, you have that surveillance systems, closed CCTVs, closed circuit TVs, which are installed on every nook and corner of the streets in every part of the world. Even Kashmir is technologically so much backward, I would say 1,000 years than any other technologically advanced country. But there are CCTVs installed everywhere, and they use this facial recognition softwares which could actually get the faces of the people. And then here in Kashmir, what we do, I have actually seen this. I hope nobody listens to this, but they would actually bring a person from that mohalla or that street down to the police station and tell them to identify this person if they know. So basically that is you will say that is the surveillance in a backward country. But apart from this, in a very technologically advanced country, they would actually have those, like US had social security numbers way back in 1950s. So they would already know from this, they would feed this data to the computer, and the computer would identify the person based on this data of the screen, data of the face, and they would get the social security number and get him trapped. Same thing is happening here. Now, basically, if you talk about mobile phones, the facial recognition happens in two ways. One is called as the 2D print, and another is the 3D print. As you might be aware, iPhones use the 3D data, or even the Samsung high-end phones, premium phones, use the 3D data of the face. So while as OnePlus and any other Android device, they use the 2D version of the same thing. So what they would do is they would mark certain points on your face, and they would take data from that. And tomorrow, if they, for example, find a person on the street, and they will compare the data to the already present data on the computers, and they will run this machine-based face recognition algorithms, and they will compare the two data. And already, in India also, they have started getting those Aadhaar cards, and then they would compare the Aadhaar card with the data of the face, and they would actually recognize it for beneficial or for some other purposes. But that is how it would work. Not in China only. This is in any other country as well.
Yeah, so technology, as well as its vices, as well as whatever benefits it has, it's quite diffuse right now. So Goldie, here, I'll come to you for the concluding question. We've already discussed about this thing. It is that when we talk about these IT giants and the states in particular, they have a kind of nexus, which you very kindly mentioned already. So when we talk about authoritarian states, so this nexus between the state and the data providing companies which store or share the data, what does it mean for the authoritarian states, and how does it actually then turn out to be for the subjugated populations of the world?
Okay. So what is, so if I understand your question, I guess what you're asking is this nexus between big companies and states, how is it for people on the ground? I think, people always, I think others have said it, Uzair Saab has said it as well, that, we can't escape this, right? Because we are already in it. We are always already mediated in this world, in this nexus of knowledge, power, and our data. But at the same time, I think wherever we are, and particularly in places where populations are subjugated, there's always, like the loopholes, the things that you do both on the terrain of this nexus, but also, the ways in which you navigate your way around it. So I think actually, like, in some of my research, I've talked about this idea of transnational solidarities. And what I find is that often people from zones where they're subjugated speak out even louder, right? Even though there's this fear and terror of mass surveillance, and also fear of, like, I don't know, cyber, investigations, cyber cells, and so on. But people tend to speak louder, because then certain people, not everybody, but the louder you speak, the more chance you have of other people kind of keeping an eye on you, and organizations then, having solidarity or writing letters, or whatever it is. And I think that's one way in which I think you have a doubleness to it. You have a kind of spreading of fear, but you also have people who speak out, who have to speak out even louder, and have to kind of get that mass solidarity. So I feel like in that sense, you never give up on, you don't just cow down and say, this is it, this is the end, like Jim Morrison or somebody, you just say, like, well, actually, there is always our voice, but then there's always other things. I feel like we live in a time of uncertainty, like huge uncertainty, whether it's climate change or whether it is, so many factors, political factors, and so on. I remember once long ago attending a conference paper where they were talking about infrastructures and the vulnerability of infrastructure, right, itself, whether it's your fiber cables or whatever it is. Infrastructure itself is vulnerable. We must not forget that, right? We must not forget that in a certain sudden moment things can change entirely, and it's that crack, it's that vulnerability which big companies like, we were talking about Pegasus and the vulnerabilities of WhatsApp or end-to-end encryption software or hardware or whatever. But we must understand that even these big giants have vulnerabilities, like, so this is where we constantly never underestimate populations, is what I say.
Absolutely, quite right. This reminds me of the anti-sweatshop movements of 90s,
Yeah.
which actually it dwindled the business of Nike to 40%. So yes, definitely. So there's always like a silver lining.
Yes.
When the going gets tough, the tough get going.
Yeah, I'm thinking of BDS campaigns, for example. I mean, a while ago, not right now. And they managed, I don't know if people remember this, but they used, I don't know, there's a film actress named Scarlett Johansson, is that her name? And they used, she was advertising SodaStream, which is a product from Israel, and the activists kind of used that to show the settler colonialism in Israel. And it was so interesting because stock prices just dropped dramatically, and even in the UK here, I mean, a lot of the stores here dropped that product immediately. It was so amazing to see, just for that split period of time, what can happen. Things, you never know what can happen. I always tell my students this when I talk about technologies. You don't know what can happen. Where there is an opportunity and a sudden mobilization, things can happen. So we always look out for both the catastrophes but also the possibilities.
Absolutely. Let's only hope for the best. तो हमारे जो भी आज मेहमान हमारे पैनलिस्ट जो थे, हम आपके बहुत मशहूर हैं। आपने अपना कीमती वक्त निकाला और इतना डिटेल एट लेंथ हम लोगों के साथ बात की इन सब चीज़ों के मुतालिक। हमारे नाजरीन, हम लोगों को पूरी उम्मीद है कि आज का जो प्रोग्राम है आपको पसंद आया होगा। कुछ जो इश्यूज़ है हमारी अवेयरनेस जनरेट हुई होगी और कुछ ज़्यादा पता चला होगा हमें अपने बारे में, अपने डिवाइसेस, ये टेक्नोलॉजी, इंटरनेट या टीवी हमारे घर के अंदर आ रहा है, उसके बारे में कुछ और चीज़ें हम लोगों ने समझी होंगी। और मे भी शायद हम और जुडिशियसली और बेहतर तरीके से और मज़बूत तरीके से इन चीज़ों का इस्तेमाल करें। जितना हम फ्रीली या ओपनली या केयरलेसली इन चीज़ों का इस्तेमाल करते हैं, शायद हम आइंदा उम्मीद है कि और बेहतर तरीके से इन चीज़ों का इस्तेमाल करेंगे। तो इसी नोट पे आप भी अल्लाह के हवाले रहें, हम भी अल्लाह के हवाले रहते हैं। उम्मीद यही रखते हैं इंशाल्लाह कि नेक्स्ट वीक इसी दिन हम लोगों की फिर से मुलाकात होगी और एक अहम टॉपिक को लेकर। तब तक के लिए अस्सलाम वालेकुम।